Hi. I am going to continue to read, picking up where I left off. I'm going to back up a little bit, and I'm going to start with the paragraph having fixed in his own mind the difference between the intellectual, the emotional, and the moving functions. A man must, as he observes himself, immediately refer his impressions to this or that category. And at first, he must take mental note of only such observations as regards which he has no doubt whatever, that is, those where he sees at once to what category they belong. He must reject all vague or doubtful cases and remember only those which are unquestionable. If the work is carried on properly, the number of unquestionable observations will rapidly increase, and that which seemed doubtful before will be clearly seen to belong to the first, the second, the third center. Each center has its own memory, its own associations, its own thinking. As a matter of fact, each center consists of three parts: the thinking, the emotional, and the moving. But we know very little about this side of our nature. In each center, we know only one part. Self observation, however, will very quickly show us that our mental life is much richer than we think, or in any case, that it contains more possibilities than we think. At the same time, as we watch the work of the centers, we shall observe side by side with their right working, their wrong working, that is, the working of one center for another, the attempts of the thinking center to feel or to pretend that it feels, the attempts of the emotional center to think, the attempts of the moving center to think and feel. As has been said already, one center working for another is useful in certain cases, for it preserves the continuity of mental activity. But in becoming habitual, it becomes at the same time harmful, since it begins to interfere with right working by enabling each center to shirk its own direct duties and to do not what it ought to be doing, but what it likes best at the moment. In a normal, healthy man, each center does its own work, that is, the work for which it was specially destined and which it can best perform. There are situations in life which the thinking center alone can deal with and find a way out of. If at this moment the emotional center begins to work instead, it will make a muddle of everything, and the result of its interference will be most unsatisfactory. In an unbalanced kind of man, the substitution of one center for another goes on almost continually, and this is precisely what being unbalanced or neurotic means. Each center strives, as it were, to pass its work on to another, and at the same time, it strives to do the work of another center for which it is not fitted. The emotional center working for the thinking center brings unnecessary nervousness, feverishness, and hurry into situations where, on the contrary, calm judgment and deliberation are essential. The thinking center working for the emotional center brings deliberation into situations which require quick decisions and make a man incapable of distinguishing the peculiarities and the fine points of the position. Thought is too slow. It works out a certain plan of action and continues to follow it, even though the circumstances have changed and quite a different course of action is necessary. Besides, in some cases, the interference of the thinking center gives rise to entirely wrong actions, because the thinking center is simply incapable of understanding the shades and distinctions of many events. Events that are quite different for the moving center and for the emotional center appear to be alike to it. Its decisions are much too general and do not correspond to the decisions which the emotional center would have made. This becomes perfectly clear if we imagine the interference of thought, that is, of the theoretical mind, in the domain of feeling, or of sensation, or of movement. In all three cases, the interference of the mind leads to wholly undesirable results. The mind cannot understand shades of feeling. We shall see this clearly if we imagine one man reasoning about the emotions of another. He is not feeling anything himself, so the feelings of another do not exist for him. A full man does not understand a hungry one, but for the other, they have a very definite existence. And the decisions of the first, that is, of the mind, can never satisfy him. In exactly the same way, the mind cannot appreciate sensations. For it, they are dead. Nor is it capable of controlling movement. Instances of this kind are the easiest to find. Whatever work a man may be doing, it is enough for him to try to do each action deliberately with his mind, following every movement, and he will see that the quality of his work will change immediately. If he is typing, his fingers, controlled by his moving center, find the necessary letters themselves. But if he tries to ask himself before every letter, where is K? Where is the comma? How is this word spelled? He at once begins to make mistakes or to write very slowly. If one drives a car with the help of one's mind, one can go only in the lowest gear. The mind cannot keep pace with all the movements necessary for developing a greater speed. To drive at full speed, especially in the streets of a large town, while steering with the help of one's mind, is absolutely impossible for an ordinary man. Moving center working for thinking center produces, for example, mechanical reading or mechanical listening, as when a man reads or listens to nothing but words and is utterly unconscious of what he is reading or hearing. This generally happens when attention, that is the direction of the thinking center's activity, is occupied with something else, and when the moving center is trying to replace the absent thinking center. But this very easily becomes a habit, because the thinking center is generally distracted not by useful work, by thought, or by contemplation, but simply by daydreaming or by imagination. It's really interesting to read this material while I'm reading it out loud to you. Obviously, you can tell I am not the best reader out loud. I do feel like when I read in my head, I'll read things a few times over. I don't even notice it, but that's what I do. I'll read it and then I'll get distracted by something and then I'll have to read the paragraph again. Because I'm reading it out loud live here, I don't do that. So it's a challenge to read things, and it gives me a great respect for people who are either on Audible or people I work with who read things out loud and get the point across because they are focused on what they are reading. It's almost like they know what they're reading before they read it. And maybe some people do preparation and they're more prepared, and that's why they are great readers out loud. Or maybe they're just great at focusing what they are reading because they read and do this so much. And so they become aware of their shortcomings, and they've overcome them, not by frustration or trying to change them, but by just repetition and practice. That's what I'm assuming anyways. It's really cool to read this material and to have these realizations while I'm reading them, and to not really get tripped out by them, but to just sort of smile and realize that I am exhibiting these kinds of, symptoms, I would say. I'm exhibiting these symptoms that Gurdjieff is talking about, and it's a very self-aware type of thing. And this is makes me just want to read this stuff over and over again to myself live so that I can, in a way, this is recording, right? The recording he's talking about. And I suppose this is why I'm doing this. There are groups that go through this material. Fourth Way groups. There's a Seattle Gurdjieff Center that will go through this material and other material by Gurdjieff and Ouspensky and talk about it. I myself have not done that, but I suppose this is my attempt to start some kind of group work, even though I don't think I've had a single person join these live streams while I'm reading it. Maybe someday somebody will. Maybe someday I'll join a Gurdjieff group. Right now, the closest thing I have to it is 12-step. I go to AA meetings. Obviously, at AA meetings, we're not reading Gurdjieff. We're reading out of the Big Book or Living Sober or Daily Reflections. But I would say that 12-step work is in line with this work, the Fourth Way. There is actually a line in the Big Book where Bill W., I think it's Bill W., he's talking about when he finally got it about sobriety, and it's the third step where I should know this by heart, and I'm nervous right now because I don't. But I'm just going to read it. Oh my gosh. Oh, this is crazy. All right. Yeah. Duh. Step 3 is made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. Some people say understood God. I would say I'm still very much in the process of doing this. I am going through the 4th step with my sponsor, but I believe all the 12 steps should be attempted to be practiced daily. And I oftentimes go to the 1st step, which is admitting that I'm powerless, because I'm still grappling with the disease. I have 103 days sober, and I very much want to do things my own way. I'm very much, in some ways, go back and forth with being unwilling to turn my will and my care and my life over to my higher power. And we have this line in 12 step where we say the disease is cunning, baffling, and powerful. Really getting on a tangent here. But the disease can almost use even this kind of stuff to distract me from what I should be doing. And I am meeting with my sponsor tomorrow night to go over 4th step material that I have written down. I'm about 75% finished, and I'm going to cram tonight and tomorrow. Hopefully I'll just be done by tonight. But this is just an example of how my disease, my ego, it's fearful. It doesn't want to be caught. It doesn't want to be seen by the higher power for what it is. And 12 step is really cool in uncovering that egotistical. Richard Rohr, the contemplative mystical Christian, calls it the false self. And I really like to call it the false self. A Course in Miracles calls it the ego. And I like to put it all in line with the disease of addiction, the disease of egotism, the disease of lying to myself and lying to others. I really feel like these lies that the consciousness is not even really aware of, because denial is right in line with the disease. It's cunning, baffling, and powerful. And the reason I love the 4th work or the 4th way and the work of Gurdjieff is it's unraveling denial. It's admitting that in this day and age, he calls you out. And I'll probably read those earlier chapters sometime, but he really just calls us out. Like when he just says, you're a machine. What does he call a messy machine? I think is what he called, or a mad machine, and calls out all the contradictions, all the different eyes. Like today I want to do this, but tomorrow it's like the whims just go, they come and go. And this work is really taking like that higher self and getting everything in line by stopping the lies, by examining the self and saying, oh, I do that. I'm going to stop here and I'm going to acknowledge that. So anyways, tangent over. That was a really long one, but here we go. Imagination is one of the principal sources of the wrong work of centers. Each center has its own form of imagination and daydreaming. But as a rule, both the moving and the emotional centers make use of the thinking center, which very readily places itself at their disposal for this purpose. Because daydreaming corresponds to its own inclinations. Daydreaming is absolutely the opposite of useful mental activity. Useful in this case means activity directed towards a definite aim and undertaken for the sake of obtaining a definite result. Daydreaming does not pursue any aim, does not strive after any result. The motive for daydreaming always lies in the emotional or in the moving center. The actual process is carried on by the thinking center. The inclination to daydream is due partly to the laziness of the thinking center. That is, its attempts to avoid the efforts connected with work directed towards a definite aim and going in a different direction, and partly to the tendency of the emotional and the moving centers to repeat to themselves, to keep alive or to recreate experiences, both pleasant and unpleasant, that have been previously lived through or imagined. Daydreaming of disagreeable, morbid things is very characteristic of the unbalanced state of the human machine. After all, one can understand daydreaming of a pleasant kind and find logical justification for it. Daydreaming of an unpleasant character is an utter absurdity, and yet many people spend 9/10 of their lives in just such painful daydreams about misfortunes which may overtake them or their family, about illnesses they may contract, or sufferings they will have to endure. Imagination and daydreaming are instances of the wrong work of the thinking center. Observation of the activity of imagination and daydreaming forms a very important part of self-study. Observation of the activity of imagination and daydreaming forms a very important part of self-study. If any of you are familiar with Neville Goddard calls the imagination Jesus Christ. Now, I think what he means by that is the working functional imagination. I don't think Gurdjieff is saying imagination is bad here. He's saying that when people start to drift off in daydreaming, like imagination is a powerful thing. And he's pointing out that it's being wasted. It's just being wasted on these daydreams. But if it's harnessed, it can really do powerful things. I think the people, the movers and the shakers of this world, or the healers, people that have started humanitarian efforts that had never been thought of before, people that have changed history for the better, altered the course of history, which I think a lot of people want to do. They somewhere they still believe that they can do that, and that is a very important aspect of life, is using their imagination. At some point, they may have daydreamed about helping humanity or their community or their family even, but days go by and patterns happen. The same old just keeps repeating themselves, and they don't get to live out their dreams. That is such an important aspect of life, such an important aspect of our happiness and whether we feel fulfilled in this life. And he's saying the observation of that activity of imagination and daydreaming forms a very important part of self-study. And he was saying that just because you fantasize or daydream about things, whether good or bad, doesn't mean they're happening. So therefore, they're completely useless. And they're wasting energy and time where you could be using the thinking center to actually enact or make a difference. So observation, begin at the beginning, like he says, observation. The next object of self-observation must be habits in general. Every grown-up man consists wholly of habits, although he is often unaware of it and even denies having any habits at all. This can never be the case. All three centers are filled with habits, and a man can never know himself until he has studied all his habits. The observation and the study of habits is particularly useful because in order to see and record them, one must escape from them, free oneself from them, if only for a moment. So long as a man is governed by a particular habit, he does not observe it. But at the very first attempt, however feeble, to struggle against it, he feels it and notices it. Therefore, in order to observe and study habits, one must try to struggle against them. This opens up a practical method of self-observation. It has been said before that a man cannot change anything in himself, that he can only observe and record. This is true, but it is also true that a man cannot observe and record anything if he does not try to struggle with himself, that is, with his habits. This struggle cannot yield direct results, that is to say, it cannot lead to any change, especially to any permanent and lasting change. But it shows what is there. It's humbling. That's my take. It's very humbling. Without a struggle, a man cannot see what he consists of. The struggle with small habits is very difficult and boring, but without it, self-observation is impossible. Now, right there, a lot of people might just ditch this book altogether and say, well, like, if self-observation is not going to change me and it's very difficult and boring, why? Why even struggle? Why be self-observant? Why be self-aware? Let's keep reading and find out. Even at the first attempt to study the elementary activity of the moving center, a man comes up against habits. For instance, a man may want to study his movements, may want to observe how he walks, but he will never succeed in doing so for more than a moment if he continues to walk in the usual way. But if he understands that his usual way of walking consists of a number of habits, for instance, of taking steps of a certain length, walking at a certain speed, and so on, and lie tries to alter them. I think that might be a typo. And tries to alter them. That is to walk faster or slower, to take bigger or smaller steps. He will be able to observe himself and to study his movements as he walks. If a man wants to observe himself when he is writing, he must take note of how he holds his pen and try to hold it in a different way from usual. Observation will then become possible. In order to observe himself, a man must try to walk not in his habitual way. He must sit in unaccustomed attitudes. He must stand when he is accustomed to sit. He must sit when he is accustomed to stand. And he must make with his left hand the movements he is accustomed to make with his right hand, and vice versa. All this will enable him to observe himself and study the habits and associations of the moving center. I think that's interesting because earlier he did say, it's almost like earlier he was saying, don't analyze, right? He said, just record. And then he gave a definition of analyzing, and it was like, well, how do I change this? You get kind of lost in thought and carried away. And he's saying, well, once you get carried on that line of thinking, then you stop observing. But now he's saying it's impossible to observe without doing something different. All this is about self-awareness. It's all about staying self-aware and not being carried away. And he's really just using physical habits. He's using examples of, I think it's yoga right now, right? If any of you are familiar with the asanas in yoga, they are physical postures that you sit in that up to 15 minutes to an hour get to be very uncomfortable, and you really want to fidget. You really want to do things. And I think that's what he is getting at right now, is he's saying, take a look at your posture and your physical habits. Take a look at the physical things, your movement center, and be aware of it. I think that's what he's getting at. He's saying that observation, first of all, you have to be willing to struggle with this. It's going to be a struggle. And then second of all, use these physical differences, observe your physical habits and patterns, and merely try to be aware. And then he's kind of saying, like, I dare you to try to do something different and then see how you feel about that. He's saying all this will enable you to observe yourself and study the habits and associations of the moving center specifically. Okay. So we're just talking about the moving center. In the sphere of the emotions, it is very useful to try to struggle with the habit of giving immediate expression to all one's unpleasant emotions. Okay. It is very useful to try to struggle with the habit of giving immediate expression to all one's unpleasant emotions. Many people find it very difficult to refrain from expressing their feelings about bad weather. It is still more difficult for people not to express unpleasant emotions when they feel that something or someone is violating what they may conceive to be order or justice. Besides being a very good method for self-observation, the struggle against expressing unpleasant emotions has at the same time another significance. It is one of the few directions in which a man can change himself or his habits without creating other undesirable habits. Therefore, self-observation and self-study must, from the first, be accompanied by the struggle against the expression of unpleasant emotions. Okay, so he is saying, if you do struggle against expressing unpleasant emotions, this is a healthy habit that will not have can't remember how he put it before, but it will not create other undesirable habits. That's what he's saying. So we're getting permission from Gurdjieff to struggle with our physical habits, our postures, our fidgeting, perhaps even writing with your left hand if you're right-handed, or just getting up earlier, doing things differently physically throughout the day, and then also noticing your unpleasant emotions and your eagerness to express them and refraining, struggling against those. Those are two things he's permitting the beginner to go ahead and practice. Not only permitting, but saying that these are helpful things to become more self-observant of oneself. If he carries out all these rules while he observes himself, a man will record a whole series of very important aspects of his being. To begin with, he will record with unmistakable clearness the fact that his actions, thoughts, feelings, and words are the result of external influences and that nothing comes from himself. He will understand and see that he is in fact an automaton acting under the influences of external stimuli. He will feel his complete mechanicalness. Everything happens. He cannot do anything. He is a machine controlled by accidental shocks from outside. Each shock calls to the surface one of his eyes, one of his identities. A new shock, and that eye disappears, and a different one takes its place. Another small change in the environment, and again, there's a new eye. A man will begin to understand that he has no control of himself whatever, that he does not know what he may say or do the next moment. He will begin to understand that he cannot answer for himself even for the shortest length of time. He will understand that if he remains the same and does nothing unexpected, it is simply because no unexpected outside changes are taking place. Ouch. He will understand that his actions are entirely controlled by external conditions, and he will be convinced that there is nothing permanent in him from which control could come. Not a single permanent function, not a single permanent state. Oh my gosh, this hurts. I mean, this hurts to be self-aware of. I know I myself am like this. A guy in a meeting that I was just at, he was talking about how he was walking up to this cathedral, and he did go there to go to either a service or go pray, and he felt very spiritual, like a pilgrim on a journey up the hill to a church. And then on the way back down, when he was going home, he stopped at a taco place because he was hungry, and his credit card wouldn't work. And he got all flustered, bent out of shape, and was speaking rudely to the cashier. And he realized, I mean, at least he had this realization of like how much work he has to go. And I know myself, I woke up this morning. I'll just tell you a story about this morning. I woke up, I listened to my audiobook or YouTube or something. This is my routine. I listen to something on my phone, and I get ready for the morning. I make my caffeinated drink, I shower, I get dressed. It's pretty basic. Very low struggle. I mean, the only thing I struggle against is waking up. And then I hit the road, and I have to go drop my vehicle off for an oil change at a new dealership. And the new dealership is still being built. I couldn't even tell where it was from the road. I had to call the dealership and be like, where are you guys? Like, I can't even tell where I am. And they're like, oh, well, where do you want me to try to help you get here? And I tell them I'm looking at a few signs, like the Ford dealership sign and something else across. And they're like, oh, okay, well, we're just across the way. And I'm like, oh, okay, I think I see it, right? So I drive in. Things are still going, pretty low struggle. I get in, I check my vehicle. And I think what happens is the caffeine that I had this morning is starting to take over. And I'm normally wanting to vape. I'm a vapor. So some kind of nicotine is being needed. And I'm inside, I'm indoors, so I can't do that. And I don't notice that. I'm not aware of that. And the guy behind the counter, the Express Lube writer, he has this sheet of paper that says $249 or something. And he's getting ready to have me sign it. And they're supposed to be free because we're on a maintenance plan because it's a lease. And I'm already inside just getting flustered seeing the dollar sign. And I said, we have a maintenance plan. I didn't even say it rude. I just go, Hey, just so you know, my wife, she has a maintenance plan. And he goes, yeah, they all do. Which, that's his own deal, right? But I reacted to it. I'm like, inside, I'm thinking, that's rude. He really didn't need to say it like that. And I only asked because I'm looking at this $249 he's about to have me sign. And then he proceeds to go, oh yeah, it's all covered except for this fuel injection, blah, 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 blah. That's $80. And so he's obviously just trying to upsell me on something, right? I go, no, I don't think so. Okay, everything's still like fine, but I'm getting more and more annoyed. My agitation is rising. So my wife had called prior and made sure that I could get a ride from the east side to Seattle, which is about 18 miles. She checked twice with the person on the phone. Yep, no problem. They can do it within 20 miles. He then, after I denied the fuel service, goes, well, we can Uber you up to 10 miles. So where would you like to go? And I'm like, what? 10 miles? Oh, we checked twice with you guys. We told you where I work, and they said 2 times, both times, on different days, that it was completely fine within the mileage. And that's when I started to come apart. Now, I didn't throw a fit per se, but I started to talk like, we checked with you guys 2 times. My voice got agitated. And I'm sure if somebody was standing within 5 or 6 feet, they might turn their head and be like, why is this guy getting so bent out of shape? And I even said, this is typical dealership stuff. So, I lost my cool. I was feeling very enlightened and intellectual at home while getting ready, listening to my audiobook on, hermetic, metaphysical, whatever, what have you. And then I get here and my external stimuli, as Gurdjieff puts it, changes and a completely different eye comes out. And it's a very impatient, rude one. Definitely not a friend-making one. Definitely not one in the spirit of the holidays. So I'm going to stop there. I think this is great stuff. I think I've talked enough. But yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys think. I think this is really important work if we're not doing it already. I think some people may be doing it already in their practice without even knowing Gurdjieff, because these are the facts of life. Sometimes he may put things a little strangely, which is why I like to take commentary on them, but not all the time. Sometimes it's just flat out repetition, and so we'll pick up where we leave off next time. All right, thanks. Hope you guys have a great day.